Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. Why don't you call the roll, Cassandra?
Of course. Secretary Tawdry is present. Superintendent Choudhury,
Present.
Mr. Derenberg,
Present.
Ms. Eberhardt,
I'm here.
Secretary Flora,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons is absent. Ms. Lala is present, and Chair Casemeyer.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any revisions to the agenda?
There are no revisions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Have any public comment?
There is no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Alex, are you up and running now?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good morning, all. I
Correspondence.
apologize. I am having some technical difficulties this morning.
Yeah, we explained.
But in addition, my camera does not seem to want to start for some reason. So, but I'm here.
Okay.
So thank you. Good morning to all. In my executive director's report this morning, I will cover a number of items. First item is the correspondence received from the Maryland State Education Association. Ms. Cheryl Boast, as the leader, wrote to Chair Casemeyer regarding fine and performing arts spaces in Maryland's public school facilities. And IAC staff appreciate very much the interest of Ms. Boast and the Maryland State Education Association in these essential spaces in our public schools. Shortly after receiving the letter, IAC staff sent on your behalf, Mr. Chair, your response letting Ms. Boast know that the IAC continues to support fine and performing arts through state funding for the capital maintenance of such spaces in existing school facilities, as well as the design and construction of such spaces in renovated and new and replacement school buildings. The next item is the Executive Director's report, and I'd like to start off with a report on the fiscal year 2024 CIP. Yesterday, IAC staff posted on the IAC's website the publication listing the details of the IAC's final allocations as of last month's meeting as part of the fiscal 24 CIP or Capital Improvement Program. This publication lays out the Commission's allocations, including any minor administrative adjustments made by IAC staff pursuant to the Commission's approved motion. This publication will assist LEAs in moving forward to make use of the IAC's allocations on more than 180 projects across the state. Over the course of the coming years, the state's contributions of about $660 million will be combined with local expenditures of about 3 times this amount to fund projects that are expected to total well more than $2.5 billion. Altogether, these projects represent major investments in Maryland school facilities. But the work is not done by any means. School facilities never go away, but instead, every day, they age and suffer wear and tear that results in a need for regular scheduled maintenance and eventually replacement. The school districts are working now on their annual educational facilities master plans, and they will deliver to the IAC in October another year's requests for state participation in the next set of projects that need to be executed to maintain and modernize their portfolios of facilities. The IAC stands ready to support them with both technical assistance and available state capital dollars. One final note about transparency. This year's CIP publication on the IAC website is accompanied by an Excel spreadsheet listing the planning and funding approval data associated with this CIP, so that it's conveniently accessible for analysis and reporting by LEAs and the public. This is another example of how the IAC is making it easier for stakeholders to see what the state is doing for communities and for students. Next item is a bit of information in preparation for a topic coming on next month's IAC meeting agenda. This topic is the biannual approval of updated state local cost share share figures for each LEA. For those members who are relatively new to the IAC, pursuant to Maryland law, the IAC adopted in regulation a formula for use every 2 years in generating an updated state-local cost-sharing split for each county. The IAC uses these cost-sharing splits as part of its determination of the state contribution to each project in the CIP and for selected other IAC funding programs. The most recent set of cost share percentages were generated in 2021 for use in fiscal years 2023 and 24. At next month's meeting, staff will recommend that the IAC adopt an updated set to be used in fiscal years 2025 and 2026. In the next few days, I will send to you a memo providing background information on the state local cost shares, a description of the 7 factors included in the formula, and the results of the formula. Please read through the memo, and if you have any questions, give me a call and I'll be happy to talk with you. Next is a quick update to share with you about the IAC's statewide facilities assessment. As you know, Maryland law requires that the IAC assess the condition and educational sufficiency of each pre-K-12 facility such that the data we have becomes no more than 4 years old. To make this happen, the IAC completed a baseline assessment in 2021 of all schools and is now responsible for reassessing about 25% of each LEA's facilities each year in what we call refresh cycles. Due to procurement delays, the legislative work group's calendar and requirements, and challenges finding the right staff for our in-house assessor team, we have been a bit behind the ideal calendar timing for those refresh cycles. I'm pleased to report that we're now on track to make up for those delays and hit our 4-year target. Earlier this week, IAC staff distributed to each LEA their final data from the first refresh cycle. Under the absolutely first-rate leadership of IAC Assessment and Maintenance Group Manager Scott Snyder, the IAC's assessors are now out in the field conducting the assessments in the second refresh cycle. I expect our team to complete the second refresh cycle site visits in August and to begin the third refresh cycle site visits in November with a target completion date of May next year. This will allow us to comfortably complete the fourth and final 25% of schools by July 2025, such that each of Maryland's nearly 1,400 active and holding facilities will have had their data refreshed within 4 years of the completion of the baseline assessment. The data from the assessment is essential to our understanding of the facility's need across the state, both for the purposes of planning as well as eventually to increase the effectiveness and equitableness of the IAC's allocations of state capital dollars to better meet the need. I look forward to providing you with more updates in the future as we progress through the assessment cycles. Next, I have an update on stakeholder outreach activities. Since last month's IAC meeting, I've conducted meetings with the superintendents of Allegheny, Dorchester, Garrett, and Washington counties, including county officials from Allegheny County. I also spoke with LEA staff and other stakeholders in a session at the spring conference of the Maryland Association of School Business Officials, alongside colleagues from the Maryland Energy Administration. And I spoke with many of our LEA's facilities professionals at an IAC LEA meeting in Harford County. In the last 2 months, I've visited 8 counties, including 8 separate schools in 6 counties. I've been encountering a great deal of openness, good communications, interest in collaborative problem solving, and increasing levels of appreciation for the efforts of the IAC to assist school districts. I look forward to continuing to connect and dialogue with our LEAs by meeting with at least 3 more superintendents in just the next 3 weeks. I also plan to get out to many more, if not all, of the remaining LEAs during the coming months.
Good.
In the last month, IAC Capital Project Supervisor Melissa Wilfong and I hosted a 7th meeting of the Blueprint Facilities Work Group, and we received very helpful input from LEAs on the topic of space needs for community schools and schools serving communities with a concentration of poverty. We continue to conduct analysis of data on planned and as-built school designs, as well as to plan for the remaining workgroup meetings needed to obtain input for the development of proposed adjustments to the IAC's gross area baselines to support the requirements of the blueprint for Maryland's future. I will report further at the next month's IAC meeting on the blueprint work group and look forward to bringing proposed gross area baseline adjustments to the Commission at your August meeting. Finally, an update on the IAC's transition to independent agency status and our move to the warehouse at Camden Yards. Following the governor's signature of House Bill 458, IAC staff had been working with staff from the Department of Budget and Management to prepare for the transition from being part of MSDE to being an independent state agency on July 1st. This transition prep has been going well, and we expect the transition to be transparent in the eyes of our stakeholders. The IAC's detailed website is not expected to change at all. On the facility side, we expect that tenant fit-out work at the warehouse will begin in earnest next week, result in substantial completion in August, and that the offices will be ready for our occupancy around September 1st. And I stand for any questions you may have on any of these topics.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions for Alex on his report? Okay. The consent agenda.
Thank you,
Any
Mr. Chair.
questions? Sure. Any questions about the consent agenda? Alex, you have any comments about it at all?
Just a quick note, staff made a correction in the reissued agenda for $2 figures for contract number 21 for City Schools Coldstream Park Pre-K 8 roof replacement project. Those are in this revised agenda. Otherwise, no additional comments. Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ms. Everhart, second. Mr. Derenberg, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3, FY 2024 capital budget. Cassandra?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. This is just an informational item. Now that session is over, we wanted to briefly go over with you the annual budget and the provisions in the IAC's independence bill, which passed and was signed by the governor last month. First, the budget, and you can see this on page 66 of your agenda. Our budget this year consisted primarily of general fund and special fund and special funds. In total, we received $485 million for the capital improvement program, plus an additional $40 million for the enrollment growth and relocatable classroom program. It's listed here as the supplemental capital grant, which is an add-on to the capital improvement program. The IAC approved the vast majority of this funding at the May meeting. All that is left is a small reserve that we hold for emergency or design allocations or project cost increases that might be needed throughout the year. The Built to Learn Act funds are administered by the Maryland Stadium Authority, but approved by the IAC. To date, the IAC has approved more than $921 million in Built to Learn projects out of an estimated total $1.7 billion available. You'll see on this slide that $90 million is available for the Healthy School Facility Fund. IAC staff have received applications that we are vetting, and we expect to bring forward project recommendations to the July IAC meeting agenda. We received $20 million for a new revolving loan program. Staff are working on developing procedures for that program, which we'll bring for your consideration at a future meeting. We received only $9.6 million in GO bonds, $6.1 million for the Aging Schools program, and $3.5 million for the non-public Aging Schools program. And finally, the operating budget also includes $10 million for the School Safety Grant program. Consistent with prior years, IAC staff will recommend that the program be administered by the Maryland Center for School Safety upon approval of this body. We expect to bring that action to you at the July meeting. Now, I just quickly want to review the provisions that were included in the independence bill as amended. It's just a refresher from a presentation that we did a couple of months ago to set the stage for what will be coming in the next few months as we work to implement the bill. So on page 68 of your agenda, the passage of the bill establishes the IAC as an independent unit of state government beginning this July 1. We, as Alex just mentioned, we've been coordinating with DBM. We've also been working with the Department of Information Technology and the Maryland State Department of Education to ensure a smooth transition. We'll keep you posted as to those efforts at these monthly meetings. On the next slide, as a reminder, the bill included some cleanup language around IAC membership. No further action is required based upon this provision. And then on page 70, the bill restored sunset provisions around the Aging School program and the School Safety Grant program. But the important takeaway for this is that those programs won't sunset until fiscal year 2027. So no action is needed at this time. For the next few years, those programs are going to continue as normal. On page 71, the bill increased the thresholds for superintendent review of designs and specifications to better address inflation. IAC staff are working with MSDE to update all of our guidance documents that the LEAs use accordingly. On the next page, the bill included some legislative cleanup and also removed a requirement that the IAC complete a 50-year life cycle cost assessment of public school buildings. Instead, LEAs are required to do a 50-year LCCA, which is life cycle cost assessment, that considers available alternative energy systems during the design development phase of a project. And then the IAC is required to report annually on those outcomes. This is really a positive change because it requires that analysis during the time in a project when it makes the most sense to do it. It is when there is an opportunity to make decisions based upon that really valuable information. IAC staff will begin to work with the MSDE Office of School Facilities and the Department of General Services to implement changes to LEA guidance and to collect the data necessary for the annual report. Next, some changes were made pertaining to the expected second public-private partnership agreement to be concluded by Prince George's County Public Schools, including an increase of annual funding and an increase to the minimum number of schools that must be included from 6 to 8. Finally, the 2023 Joint Chairman's Report does require the IAC to submit a report by January of 2024 on the status of the agency's progress to meet the requirements of the 2022 House Bill 1290. It's been a very busy legislative few years for the IAC. We'll continue to bring you updates on how the implementation of each of those bills is going, really going all the way back to House Bill 1783 in 2018, which kind of kicked off the evolution of the IAC right now. That was a lot of information. I can stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Cassandra. Any questions for Cassandra on House Bill 458 and the capital budget? By the way, I want to thank the superintendent for all his help in getting our bill composed and ultimately passed this year. I want to thank him for that. Okay, we don't need to. That was just for information only. Let's move on to item 4, maximum state allocation revision and Built to Learn program funding request. Melissa.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commission. The IAC originally approved the allocation of Build to Learn Act program funding to Anne Arundel County Public Schools for the replacement of Old Mill Middle School South at the December 8th, 2022 meeting. At this meeting, the total allocation was approved at $31,149,000 and was approved based on the 50% state cost share of the total project budget. In 2022, the Educational Article 5303 K3 was amended to require that the IAC increase the state share of school construction projects by 5% percentage points for projects at schools that received a maintenance effectiveness rating of adequate and had an expected useful life of at least 120%, in addition to other incentives that were part of that action. After review of the stipulations in the law, staff found that Old Mill Middle School South project did qualify for this incentive. A revised form has been attached for review. The adjustment of the state cost share from 50% to 55% resulted in an increase in the maximum state allocation of $3,115,000, and Anne Arundel County Public Schools has requested that this increase be funded with Build to Learn Act program funding. IAC staff recommends approval of this additional Build to Learn Act program funding, and if there are no questions, I can read the motion.
Please do.
To approve Anne Arundel County Public Schools request for Old Mill Middle School South PSC 02.133 replacement project to amend the maximum state allocation to include the maintenance incentive of 5% for a revised maximum state allocation of $34,264,000 and to allocate an additional $3,115,000 to Build to Learn Act funding for a revised total allocation of $34,264,000.
Thank you, Melissa. We'll hear a motion to support that. Here's that agenda item. Excuse me.
So moved.
Discussion purposes. Any here a second? Mr. Derenberg. Anybody want to discuss or ask questions to Melissa about item number 4? All in favor of item 4, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Melissa, I want to Thank you for all your work. I hope you're happy here at IAC.
Yeah.
I know we all are grateful to have you.
Thank
Okay,
you
let's
so
move
much.
to item 5, maximum state allocation and Built to Learn programs, funding increase request. Lansdowne High School. Gene?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. The Lansdowne High School replacement project received Built to Learn approval totaling $86,589,000 at the November 18th, 2021 IAC meeting. Bids for the project were received in November of 2022. Due to market conditions and the ongoing escalation of construction costs, Baltimore County Public Schools has requested to increase the maximum state allocation for the project pursuant to COMAR Section 14390207C. COMAR requires that 3 elements be satisfied in order to approve a maximum state allocation increase for projects other than systemics. These are that 1, the project has a crucial impact on the LEA's budget, 2, the LEA has taken reasonable actions to reduce construction costs, and 3, that the increased construction costs have resulted from exceptional circumstances different from those that confront most projects in the state or region. IAC staff find that each COMAR requirement is satisfied, and the IAC designees have recommended that the IAC approve the request to increase the maximum state allocation. In addition, the State Superintendent of Schools has determined that the project meets the additional eligibility requirements listed in COMAR 14390207C2, and therefore recommends that this request be approved. An additional $8,887,000 of BTL funding will be needed to allocate to revise the maximum state allocation to $95,476,000. I will now stand for questions or read the motion.
Read the motion, Gene.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The motion is to approve Baltimore County Public Schools' request for the Lansdowne High School replacement project to amend the maximum state allocation from $86,589,000 to $95,476,000 based upon bids received pursuant to COMAR 14390207C, as reflected in the presented project worksheet, and to allocate an additional $8,887,000 of Built to Learn funding for a revised total allocation of $95,476,000.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Secretary Chowdhury, second. Secretary Flora. Okay, discussion. Any questions about this issue? Alex, you want to describe what the problem was here, or the need?
In this case, we've seen some significant cost issues with this project. It's a large one, and Gene will actually be able to provide the best description
Good.
of
Okay.
the items. Go ahead, Gene.
Absolutely. Baltimore County has received numerous bids within the past year on their projects, and in comparison to other bids they received on elementary and middle schools, this cost came up to be higher than what they were experiencing even in their local market. They did have good bid participation on the project, and this is an example of how it does meet the requirement of being in exceptional circumstances outside of the state or region. In comparison to Furley Elementary School, in terms of cost per square foot, which was approved at a prior IAC meeting, the Lansdowne cost per square foot is $473 per square foot, whereas the Furley was $547.
Alex, didn't we also, just for discussion purposes, have a question about the soil situation in certain counties?
That was going to be my question too.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner Derenberg, you as well are well aware of the soil challenges faced at the Lansdowne project, and that's not that's not unique to Baltimore County. A couple of the other counties in the state also often face challenging soil conditions in their projects. First and foremost being perhaps Prince George's County. So in this case, we had to support the costs that are associated with those issues, and we are always at the ready to ensure that we can support LEAs facing additional costs on those. Gene, were there any specific components that also jumped out as cost issues here? For example, steel or any others? You can kind of paint a little more picture.
I would have to do a more thorough analysis of the particular bid packages and compare it to industry costs in order to do that exercise. But I imagine, much like everybody is experiencing, there is substantial cost increases in steel throughout the pandemic. Roof costs have also been impacted as well. It's kind of across the board with many of the materials that go into build school facilities.
Why don't we vote on this motion and talk for a second about the soil situation that we face in several jurisdictions. In terms of the motion we're dealing with about Lansdowne High School, all in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Okay. So Alex, you began to describe it. Mr. Derenberg, do you want to ask any questions about it first, soil situation?
But I guess my biggest thing, I just want to make sure we don't build another school that's going to sink into a swamp. You know, I mean,
Absolutely. Right. And our capital projects managers, Gene inclusive, have been working carefully with our LEAs to support as much appropriate geotechnical surveying and soil analysis at the earlier planning and design stages of a project, so that any issues that may be present in a site are identified well in advance and can be included in budgeting for the project. We have seen in some past projects over the years that when soil issues were not identified, and there certainly have been a pretty good number of projects with soil challenges or soil related challenges, those costs can be very significant. Gene, you gave me a number recently about soil remediation issues as a percentage of projects and how those can rise. You want to provide any additional examples on that?
So in terms of percentages per project, that's going to be dependent on how many unsuitable soils they actually find. And as Alex mentioned earlier, in many projects, they do geotechnical surveys to which they take soil borings at various locations throughout the site. And based upon a geotechnical engineer's recommendations, many LEAs will actually include a soils allowance within their base bid to be a quantity, a number of cubic yards applied at a unit cost. Typical cost to do soil remediation, I would say, falls between $55 and $70 per cubic yard. A lot of factors that weigh into that is location to take the spoils and dump them at a local yard, and also just what pricing the contractor submits. Some LEAs set their own unit prices, and others allow the contractors who are bidding the project to define their own unit prices for consideration. So there is a lot of different ways that various LEAs across the state handle unsuitable soils, but the general theme is that geotechnical surveys are done, a quantity is defined, and a unit price at that quantity is put into a base bid for where there are concerns.
But Alex, with conversations that we had, did you say to me that these test borings for soil is not a requirement?
So the amount of technical surveys done on soils is not a hard and fast amount. It's not a rule as to how much has to be done. Each LEA has the responsibility and the flexibility too to manage what they think are potential issues and to engage testing at a cost level that they think is appropriate and reasonable for what they know about the sites. What the IAC is saying to LEAs is, because soil conditions can be a significant cost factor, we recommend and support as much testing of soils earlier in the process of planning and design rather than later, so that those issues can be identified and the costs can be properly estimated and factored into the budget, so that at a later stage, if issues are encountered and costs rise, those have been essentially planned into the project and do not result in a surprise increase in costs that appears to make the project so that it looks like the project has a surprising cost escalation.
So
And
let
so
me
I
ask a
think,
couple, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
So we don't would the state pay for these tests to be done by the LEAs?
We can, because the state can participate in planning and design costs.
So according to our conversation we had, there are only certain jurisdictions that seemingly have these issues. It's not throughout the state.
It's not right. It's not in all places. We've had preponderance in kind of the center part of the state. Prince George's County having probably the highest rate of soil issues.
So Lansdowne was sinking somewhat, right, because of where it was originally put.
Right.
At some level. So, Commissioners, I guess what I'm getting to is maybe we should have a discussion is this issue something we should try to take care of up front so we don't have these issues 20 years later where you realize the building may be sinking or there's some other problem. And I don't know whether or not you can selectively say certain counties need to do these tests or we have to do it throughout the state. I don't know the answer to that legally. But
Mr. Chair, if I may,
go ahead.
I think one thing we could do is collect some data, and Melissa will be able to identify kind of some key pieces that we could look at to pull some data on how many projects have encountered these issues and where exactly they are, and we could report back to you and say, here's what we see, and here's what we think might be appropriate as a kind of a policy solution. Right? Would that be appropriate?
Sure.
Okay, then
Secretary Flory, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I've worked on several brownfield redevelopment projects, and so curious about the type of soil remediation. Are we talking about a herd sinking? Are we talking about issues related to foundation? Are we talking about toxins in the soil that require remediation and hauling off site? What type of issue are you referring to when you refer to this? Because I've seen it all in terms of redevelopment on brownfields. And I'm just curious what you're typically running into. Is it a toxicity issue or is it a soil stability issue?
Melissa, would you like to summarize what we have on that?
It's to start from a sort of bigger picture. There are a lot of risks related to site development that all have to do with soils, and that's some of the biggest risk on project costs for any project. It's pretty typical. They are related to whether the soils are infiltratable. If they're not infiltratable, you will be building larger stormwater management systems. So there's a cost there, and those tests are infiltration tests. Then there's whether the soil can support the building. So like in Prince George's County, the issue there is clays. Clays cannot reliably support building foundations. So in that case, you would have larger mat foundations, or in cases where there was other materials that were not suitable for building support, you would end up with, caissons or something,
right,
into the earth, which both are allocated for. There's additional costs, some significant additional costs with either one of those options if the foundation will not support a building. So those are structural borings, that will go 15, 20 feet into the ground of the building pad. And then there's the issue you were talking about, which is the environmental issue, and that will be preliminarily analyzed at a site assessment level for any particular risks of environmental hazards. If it's determined that there are, you go to a phase 2 and you do soil testing. And if there are environmental hazards for soil testing, obviously they need to be remediated, so they can either be removed off site, which then requires you to bring material on site to fill where where the soil is removed, or they can be encapsulated on site, which also both have additional expenses. So there's multiple ways to deal with each of those issues, but site issues across the state are the biggest risk for unanticipated costs. And borings and testing for each of those issues is done preliminarily on all projects, but sometimes no matter how careful you are, rock, I would say, add to the list of expensive, particularly unanticipated. Rock and clay can come in veins across the site and miss a soil boring. So
Right.
hopefully that helps.
No, I understand the categories. The reason I wanted to amplify that, and thank you for summarizing that for everyone, is that if we were to do any kind of review of what the type of situation is, because as you explained, which I'm well aware of, is that there's so many different categories. And so to really, I think, try for us to figure out how to proactively assess which categories are different schools typically following into. I just wanted to make sure that we sort of really look at those different types of buckets, because I think related to that is, to the extent we can understand the types of soil issues, which are quite broad, the better I think we can figure out proactively how we need to be maybe perhaps doing more up front. Because I would also advocate that to the extent possible, we should be encouraging reuse of existing sites. And if doing that, does create some complexities, I think we have to be prepared to support those rather than supporting schools on greenfield sites that are not walkable, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would certainly advocate that we understand that these issues better in terms of those various buckets, and be prepared to proactively support addressing those as part of a bigger vision and mission of reusing existing sites and reusing and doing infill with schools so that they are accessible to the majority of the population by something other than cars and busing in. So that's sort of my bigger point that I'm trying to get to as to how we look at these. So thank you for my indulgence.
Derenberg.
So just getting back to Lansdale, so we're comfortable that this 320,000 square foot school is built on good ground.
Yes, Baltimore County Public Schools has done, due diligence on that, and we're obviously very sensitive to those possibilities, considering the history of the existing building. This is, there's no indication that we have, or that they have not done the needed homework on that, so to speak. But I think to Secretary Flores' point, looking across the state, the IAC staff, is already has established processes to evaluate the smart growth and planning implications of school siting, as we help LEAs identify how they're going to balance their supply and demand issues, right? How are they identifying the best potential sites and ways to meet the demand of their students and where they live? And knowing that there are significant costs associated with building schools out in, as you mentioned, green fields, as opposed to reusing existing sites. And it is complex at the portfolio level, because some LEAs do not have adequate sites available in their established populated areas and are struggling with site capacity constraints. And others do have options. So, we know that one size does not fit all, and we work with each LEA, and we ask them to share with us their thought processes and their considerations as they do school siting. We're quite aware of the additional costs that go along with transportation to more far-flung sites. In this particular issue with the soils and planning, I think that because of the change in statute allowing the IAC to participate in the costs of geotechnical surveys and other planning and design activities, we now have the option to better support LEAs in grappling with those, and that our first step should be to do a little review of the data on what those issues have been so that we can properly categorize them, as you said, Secretary Flora, and identify what the best supports would be to the LEAs to get those activities done at the right time in the planning process. So we'll do that and bring back results
Good.
to you at a coming meeting.
Good idea. Anyone else want to make any comments about this issue? Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to item 6, FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program rescission and Build to Learn program funding requests, Montgomery County Parkland Middle School. Arabia, how are you?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. The first part of this agenda item is to rescind the approved allocation for the FY 2023 Parkland Middle School Addition CIP project and to transfer the allocation to the local education agency's reserved account as the cost of this project has increased based on bid results. The second part is to fund the Parkland Middle Addition project through the Build to Learn program. As background, the Build to Learn Act authorizes the Maryland Stadium Authority to sell up to $2.2 billion in bond proceeds for school construction projects. However, until the full extent to which funding will be available to support debt service is known, MSA estimates that the available bond proceeds will be around $1.7 billion. The law, as Alex spoke about earlier, also makes the cost of planning, design, furniture, and fixtures eligible for state participation, which is important to ensure that the occupants are housed in buildings that are well-designed, healthy, safe, and educationally sufficient. IAC staff recommend approval of Montgomery County Public Schools request. I can read the motion, and I and Melissa will be available for questions.
Okay.
The motion is to approve rescission of $367,000 allocated to the Montgomery County Public Schools Parkland Middle School Addition project in the FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program and transfer other rescinded funds to the LEA's reserved account, and to approve a Build to Learn program allocation of $6,693,000 to the Montgomery County Public Schools for the addition project of 27,510 gross square feet at Parkland Middle.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to that effect? Secretary Chaudhry, a second, Ms. Everhart. Any discussion on the motion? Number 6, item number 6. All in favor, raise your hands. All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to item 7, Built to Learn program funding increases, Montgomery County Public School, Neillsville Middle School, and Woodward High School. Melissa? Melissa, you're on. There you go.
Yep, gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, 2 more Build to Learn Act funding projects for this meeting. The first is the Neillsville Middle School Replacement Project. It was originally approved at $27,362,000 at the February 10th, 2022 IAC meeting. This request was less than the available funding based on their maximum state allocation. MCPS has subsequently requested an increase to the allocation of $5,210,000 for a total maximum state allocation of $32,572,000. The second project is the Woodward High School project, which was originally approved for $28,907,000 at the July 8th, 2021 IAC meeting. This funding was an early preliminary allocation process for approval prior to the development of a maximum state allocation for the project. Since the project was being designed and built in 2 phases, the total program area for the project could not yet be determined at that early stage. The project has now progressed to construction for phase 1 and design for phase 2, and the total maximum state allocation can now be determined. Montgomery County Public Schools is requesting an additional $49,690,000 for a total maximum state allocation of $78,597,000 for the project. IAC staff is recommending approval of both Build to Learn Act funding program increases. Can read the motion?
Please.
Item 1, to increase the maximum state allocation in Build to Learn Act program funding for the Montgomery County Public Schools Neillsville Middle School Public School number 15.136 replacement project by $5,210,000 from the original $27,362,000 for a total revised allocation of $32,572,000. And 2, to increase the maximum state allocation in Build to Learn Act program funding for Montgomery County Public Schools Woodward High School, PSC number 15.125, replacement project for $49,690,000 from the original allocation of $28,907,000 for a revised total allocation of $78,597,000.
Thank you. There is a motion to that effect for discussion purposes. Secretary Chaudhry, second by Ms. Everhart. Any questions for Melissa? Secretary Flora. Your mute's on, Secretary. You're muted.
Gotcha. Thank you. I would prefer if these were two separate motions. It seems that we have so many cost increases that there's a certain point at which anything over like 20% cost increase or 25% is one thing, but when you and I understand the background you described, but when you get into this big of a increase of 49,000, that seems like that's a whole other level of discussion and motion. So it'd be my preference if these were broken in, this type of item was broken into two separate motions. I'm not sure what the usual protocol is for that because it's all Montgomery County or whatever, but I do feel that with all these cost increases, it would be interesting to sort of understand what the across the board percentage is happening and have a better graphic analysis of, is that consistently at 20% across that we're seeing? And then item 2, I think I need to know a little bit more about the motion, the second part of this motion. When I look at that big of a number, really understanding that a little bit better. So that's just sort of questions I have before I feel like I can be comfortable voting on this as a unit.
Melissa or Alex, you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Flora, these are actually very special, unusual cases, and I'd like to have Melissa give a little description of each so that you can get a sense of why these increases over the original allocations. They're not exactly examples of cost escalation of the market conditions based type that you may be thinking. So Melissa, can you describe each in turn? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. They aren't project cost increase. The first one, Neillsville, is just a choice that Montgomery County has made for the allocation of their funding. They didn't originally ask for the maximum state allocation, so they didn't ask for as much as they could have gotten for the state. So what they've done is just change the allocation of their local funding for this project and ask for an additional funding from the Build to Learn Act. So it's not a change in the total project cost. It's just a change on their books as to what quantity of local funding they're putting to this project compared to what quantity of state funding they're putting toward this project. Because they have a fixed amount of BTL funding, the decisions that they make regarding which projects they request BTL funding on have just changed over time. So that's for Neillsville. That's the more straightforward one. Woodward is the IAC had moved forward with BTL funding to support that project early in the process. So phase 1 of the project was under design. Phase 1 is a majority of the construction of the school, but it's not the entire school. So there's about 60,000 square feet of that project that's constructed in phase 2. And the program associated with that phase 2 construction was not yet determined when they began the phase 1 construction. So because the maximum state allocation couldn't be determined until that phase 2 program was fixed, the IAC, the staff recommended a very small allocation to that project until the time when Montgomery County could verify the total program, and then we could set a maximum state allocation. So that's also not an increase in budget. It's just an increase in BTL funding for that project. And we held off on being able to process that until the program for phase 2 was solidified. And phase 2 has an arts magnet program that was under some, it took a longer time to decide the program for that project than it did for the maximum amount of the program for the phase 1 project. So once that program was set, then we could set a maximum state allocation, and then they could request the bulk of the funding they hadn't previously requested. I hope that helps.
I'm following it. I think are we setting a precedent that's a bad precedent, or how in terms of process? I guess I'm just a little concerned about sort of how this process unfolded, and the precedent that it sets and how it relates to our overall protocols as it relates to a phase 1, phase 2 type project in this regard. So it's just a little disconcerting about how that process unfolded. I understand what they did. But how does that relate to our response in the future, or what our directives are in the future for other schools that might take this same?
Right. No, absolutely hear your concern, Secretary. This is an unusual case. We generally do not hear requests for two-phase development or funding approaches to projects, and we certainly don't recommend that. And we don't offer it either. This was a specific case of a project that came up on the Built to Learn Act radar when the IAC was asked to roll out the Built to Learn Act funding as quickly as possible, because Stadium Authority needed to know what the demand might be for project funding so that they could plan and execute the bonding needed to support these projects. So in a sense, the first allocation on Woodward was not a placeholder, but it was getting Woodward's first foot in the door for the BTL funding so that it could be included in that first round of bonding and funding. And we knew at the time that all of the components of the program were not nailed down, and that Montgomery County Public Schools would still need some more time to finalize those and let us know, and that they would have to come back for essentially a part 2 of the funding decision on that project. That is very rare. I don't foresee that happening, regularly or even occasionally.
Alex, I might want to propose an amendment to this motion so we make that a little bit more clear. In terms of the way item 2 is worded, it just sounds like we're giving all this additional. I'm just wondering if we should say something like
understood.
Replacement project, program, preliminary program funding, replacement project by 49 million for not a revise, but for the addition of a phase 2. I just feel like that wording of that motion.
Yeah.
Why don't we hold?
Yeah.
Madam Secretary, why don't we hold for a second? Let Mr. Derenberg
Yeah,
ask
please do.
question.
Go ahead.
So I agree with Secretary Flora about there should be 2 different items. And it does seem like a slippery slope, starting a project and not knowing you're going to get the second half of the funding. I don't know. That kind of scares me. They've been building schools for how long? I'm not real comfortable with that.
Okay. Well, look, do we need to do this today, Alex?
So, Melissa, is there going to be any schedule effect if we do this allocation approval next month instead of this month?
No.
Okay, so then we can bring it back with revised language
So
next month.
Is there a consensus that we wait till next month to deal with this issue and try to add some explanation to each of the to the motions to make it clear why this is happening.
And we could
Is that
certainly
okay?
split them as well if you
Okay.
prefer.
Why don't we do that?
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Mr. Jernberg. Let's go to item 8, FY 2022 Capital Improvement Program Project Rescission, Queen Anne's County Public Schools, Kennard Elementary. Arabia?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If it is acceptable for agenda items this meeting that are straightforward, I would like to read from the motion, and Melissa, Jean, and myself, of course, will be available to respond to questions.
Sure.
Okay, so due to higher than expected bid results, the IEC is being asked to approve the rescission of the FY 2022 Capital Improvement Program funding approval of $663,000 for the Queen Anne's County Public Schools Kennard Elementary School roof replacement project and transfer of the rescinded funds to the LEA's reserved account. We stand for questions.
There a motion to that effect? Motion by Senator Law and seconded by Ms. Everhart. Any more discussion on this motion? Secretary Flora.
All right, I have questions on this also. So if I'm understanding this right, then because the bids were high on the Kennard School and Kent Island, they're pulling money away from one project and over to the other one. Is the partial roof replacement project not happening or being put on hold, or?
So the LEA intends to resubmit the project in a future fiscal year with a modified budget request. So they're rescinding it for right now, but they're going to come back with a higher requested state share.
For the elementary school. So I presume that roof replacement is able to be fine. That's their decision. Okay. And then once again, we're getting into high bids. Do we have more information in the background in terms of, so we're taking the $663,000 and moving it over, but I don't have any information about the bids that came in on the high school project or what that percent increase is of total or anything about that one either. Is there more?
Jean can handle that.
Yeah, I can address that question. So Kent Island High School has recently received bids, and the bid results led to a cost per square foot between $75 and $80 per square foot. At an upcoming IAC meeting, you will see the contract approval package for that project.
Okay.
With recent bid climate, especially on roof projects, as you I'm sure have noticed in the recent IAC meeting, there was a cost increase request for William Paca Elementary School roof, and that cost per square foot was also between the $75 and $80 per square foot. So Queen Anne's County is not alone in what these drastic increases are. There are kind of little blips across the state right now where there are projects coming in between $70 and $80 per square foot. Because of that, that is why this project is being rescinded. And as Arabia stated, Queen Anne's County Public Schools is planning on resubmitting this in a future fiscal year CIP.
So it's just going into the reserve. So to your point, we're not actually voting on the other project yet. We're just voting to move it into the reserve fund, which I'm a little better with. But there's another question out there from our other commission member, Darrenberg.
Mr. Darrenberg.
So I'm just wondering, with the increases of roof, is there a certain type of roof that we're seeing? Like, is it a rubber roof or?
I mean,
even increases?
Even for the William Paca roof, that was a TPO roof as discussed in the most recent IAC meeting. The particular one for Kent Island High, I can look that up very quickly.
Are we using like metal roofs on some parts?
I do not believe Kent Island High School roof is a metal roof.
Secretary Flora.
On these roof projects, are we reviewing for the ability to accommodate solar, considering our overall climate change goals and other aspects of optimizing roof? Just bigger question, but on all of these, I guess that's a future response, perhaps.
I would imagine for a systemic renovation project that a life cycle cost analysis inclusive of looking into solar panels is probably not going to be done. I would say for a major capital improvement project that would be more likely.
In the future, it'd be good to know that, because considering our aggressive climate goals, I would rather be doing it on these rooftops than on prime farmland. So maybe that's something we can take a look at.
Absolutely. If I may, Mr. Chair, Secretary Flora, I've been in discussions just the last couple of months with the Maryland Energy Administration
Mhm.
about coordination between their teams and ours around evaluating every facility in each LEA's portfolio for the potential for solar to support not just net zero schools, but also energy efficiency improvements in the schools that are existing and cannot, we obviously no one can afford to replace with net zero, immediately.
Mhm.
And so that is a strategic thing that we're actually developing now and rolling out to address the Climate Solutions Now Act and to address the recently passed HB 458, which adjusts life cycle cost analysis for every LEA to look at alternative energy options for every project. So those are new. We are just kind of identifying how we can go about supporting the LEAs with that, how to guide them, and how to ensure that we're looking at every opportunity to save energy as they go forward. So yes, this, I wouldn't say we have a huge amount of momentum yet on that, but it is moving in that correct direction.
Right. That's really great to hear. And you have my full support. And on the technical level, if I can be of any help, let me know. Thank you.
Thank
We've
you.
been talking to Senator Pinsky for quite a while.
Yes.
About this issue. Mr. Derenberg, do you have another question, or are you okay? Okay, on the motion, on item number 8, all in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 9, FY 2024 Capital Improvement Program Amendment to Frederick County Public Schools Brunswick Middle School Roof, another roof, Arabia.
Yes, the commission is being asked to approve an amendment to the fiscal year 2024 Capital Improvement Program allocation for the Frederick County Public Schools Brunswick Middle School Roof Project to increase funds by $38,000 from the Frederick County Public Schools reserved account, thereby increasing the state share from $494,000 to $532,000. This is a minor budget adjustment to fully fund the project.
That's basically the motion you just read.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Oh,
Mr. Derenberg, second by Secretary Chaudhry. Any questions about this? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Okay. Item 10, similar issue, FY 2024 Capital Improvement Program Amendment, St. Mary's County Public Schools, Choctaw High School.
Yes.
Arabia?
Yes, sir. The motion is to approve an amendment to the fiscal year 2024 Capital Improvement Program to include local planning approval for the Choctaw High School limited renovation project. Project eligibility was confirmed shortly after the IAC's May meeting. Staff recommends approval of the LEA's proposal to renew the existing building systems in the facility.
Thank you. Any motion, hear a motion to that effect? Secretary Flora, second by Ms. Eberhardt. Any more discussion on this issue? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay. Item 11, FY 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund Project cancellations, Arabia.
Yes, members of the commission are being asked to rescind funding for 3 projects funded through the FY 2022 Healthy Schools Facility Fund Program. The Bill Elementary Plumbing Project at Allegheny has been addressed with local funds. The Thurmont Elementary Roof Project in Frederick County has been funded through another funding source. And the Maryland School for the Blind roof project is ineligible for state funding as it was bid and was completed without minority business enterprise participation. The motion is to approve the rescission of 3 FY 2022 Healthy School Facility Fund projects as presented, totaling $1,277,155, and transfer other funds to the statewide Healthy Schools Facility Fund reserved account. These funds will be combined with funding available for the FY 2024 Healthy Schools Facility Fund program.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. Darren Berg, second by Ms. Everhart. Questions about this issue? Secretary Flora. You're muted right now.
We have some confidence that they did take care of the lead issue fully, locally.
Yes, Gene, the capital project manager lead, he has reached out to the LEA and confirmed that they did address or remediate the lead issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in knowledge of there being a lead issue and then
Right.
making sure it was fully remediated. That was all I had. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes,
Did you want to add anything?
Yes, the approach Allegheny took was to replace the fixtures instead of the whole domestic system for that project.
But we're confident that it's safe.
Yes, there are fixtures replaced and filters installed in addition that address the lead.
Any other discussion, questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Two more items on the agenda. Item 12, FY 2023 Healthy School Facility Fund Project approvals, Baltimore City Public Schools. Gene?
Baltimore City Public Schools is required by law to receive at least 50% of the funding appropriated for the Healthy School Facility Fund program through an application process separate from the other Maryland jurisdictions. For fiscal year 2024, $45 million has been reserved for Baltimore City. At the January 12th IAC meeting, 2 roof projects and 2 window/door projects were approved for a total allocation of $24,568,925. Today's Healthy School Facility Fund recommendations utilize the $20 million in new authorization for HVAC-related projects. The proposed approvals are based on the prioritization of the project categories as outlined in the Administrative Procedures Guide and staff's examination of funding requests and supporting documentation. I will now stand for questions or read the motion.
Read the motion, please.
To approve Baltimore City Public Schools fiscal year 2023 Healthy School Facility Fund project allocations as presented, totaling $20 million of funds provided through the fiscal year 2023 American Rescue Plan Act for heating, ventilation, air conditioning projects.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Senator Law, second by Ms. Everhart. Questions about this motion? Mr. Derenberg.
Do we know when the 2 air conditioning replacement projects will be completed?
I believe with them being whole wide systemic renovations that they should be completed within the next 2 years. Typically, these larger scale projects take the course over 2 summers.
Any other questions? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 13, pass-through grant funding approval, Kent County High School.
Yes.
Radio.
Yes. The commission is being asked to accept a late application from Kent County and to apply $18,459 from the pass-through grant program for the Kent County High School Stadium Lighting Project, subject to reconciliation and potential adjustment at project closeout.
Any more explanation needed for this, Arabia?
No,
Okay.
this will
All right.
kind of close out. We still have a little bit of money still left, a couple of thousand in the PTG program, but this kind of dwindles that down.
Do I hear a motion to this effect? Arabia proposed. Mr. Derenberg and second by Ms. Everhart. So this think May 1st was the deadline, but we're allowing this, right, Alex?
Yes.
Okay, Rabia.
Yes.
Any questions
Yes.
against this motion? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex, any other concluding comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate everybody's engagement and deep questions on these, and look forward to bringing back additional data as described at the next meeting.
Anybody else want to ask anything? Okay, do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
Yeah.
Senator Lawless, second by Secretary Florida. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, see you next month. Enjoy early summer.